Reminder, it's 8:33 in the morning. Welcome. Nice to have everybody back here in the audience today. We'll start off with our usual prayer and pledge. We have Cameron Strange here today to lead us in prayer. If you'll come forward. And he is the missions pastor at Paul Ann Baptist Church.
Let's pray together. Father, we are thankful, God, that you love us. We're thankful for Jesus, who gives us the privilege through his sacrifice to pray and approach your throne with confidence. Lord, we just confess, God, that it's really easy for us to make our own plans and to ask your blessings on that. I pray today, Father, that we would be able to make plans and decisions, Father, that's based on your will and your desire. God, it's our desire to honor you and to lift you up, and we pray that that would be the case today. I pray for all of our leaders, Father, the men and women here who make these decisions that we've entrusted as a city to come together. Father, we pray that you would just grant them favor and blessing. God, we pray that you'd give them wisdom. God, it's our hope that we, just as Paul instructed Timothy, Father, we pray that in our conduct and in our speech, in our love and our faith and purity, Father, that we would show ourselves examples worthy of your name. God, as we just pray today, Father, we just recognize your greatness and we recognize your love, and we return that in love for you. God, and we pray all of this through Jesus. Amen.
We will now be led in pledge by Conley Carter. Would you like to come forward, Conley?
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now go into public comment. Issues or items that are not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, begin by stating their name, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. Council members may request that a discussed item be placed on a future agenda. The council takes public comment on all regular agenda items during the discussion of those items. May I also ask, if your cell phone is not turned off at this point, to please turn your cell phone off. Any public comment this morning? With there not being any public comment, we will move into the consent agenda. Billy, is there anything you'd like to pull off the consent agenda?
No.
Lane?
Nothing to pull.
Lucy? Nothing. Tommy?
No, ma'am.
Tom?
No, ma'am.
Harry?
Item G.
And I'd like to pull item J. So G and J will be pulled. With item G and J pulled, may I now have a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
A second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Harry, would you like to talk about item G, please?
Sure. Since Ryan's here, I got a couple of questions on this one. The background information on this particular truck from Lone Star Truck Group showed that the bid was $146,431, but the front of this on item G says $135,156. I guess, and you know I'm a numbers guy, so I got to ask those questions.
Yes, sir.
The difference there is that we did not select all the options that are shown in the specification. So we only opted for the base price bid, of course, at $131,706, plus the warranties, the 3 warranties that are listed there,
Great.
not the Allison transmission.
Move to approve as presented.
Second. Okay, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you very much. Good morning, Sydney.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Lovely.
Good. Thank you for the information in our packet. I really have, I think, 2, maybe 3 questions. One is, if we go to where the information is on facility discounts, which is one of the questions that we had last time, and one of the issues would be who would oversee the any variations from the information as presented here, the civic events information. And so I'm assuming that this line that says deviations from this policy must be reviewed and approved by the city's civic events advisory board. So we're going to use the city's civic events advisory board, that's a lot to say, to approve any changes from what this document represents.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And then, let's see, the other issue I think that we had, and it was nice to get this document clean like this so we could really see the changes that were being asked
No
to be
problem.
made. So, thank you.
No
I
problem.
know you weren't in charge of that last time, so you didn't know what we didn't have. And do I have any other questions or comments from the rest of council on the documents as presented in our packet?
Make a very quick comment.
Yes,
Brenda,
sir.
If I may. I want to thank Sydney. There were a couple of small items that needed to be corrected on this, and over the weekend, he took care of that. So we had an updated document yesterday
Yes.
morning early, so appreciate that.
No problem.
With that, do I have a motion? Oh, I already had a motion, so, in a second. So, all in favor of approving item, public comment.
I don't think we had a motion, did we?
Oh, I thought,
I'll move approval.
all right, with that, is there any public comment on this item? If not, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the changes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No? Thank you, keep doing the great work. Okay, we will now move into the regular agenda. And the first item is item A, consider awarding RFP NS-01-18 Animal Adoption Services to Concho Valley Paws in the amount of $60,000, budgeted for purchase fiscal year 2018, with the option to extend for 4 additional 1-year terms, and authorizing the city manager or designee to execute any related documents. Morgan, you're on.
Good morning, Mayor, Council.
Morning.
Thank y'all for your time this morning. I wanted to touch on this process and the successes we've had so far. I did want to speak to that we started this project last year because we wanted to assign our animal adoptions to a welfare organization to free up city staff to be able to focus on our core function, which of course is preventing the spread of disease. This has really freed us up to be fully trained, fully staffed in animal control. We had the opportunity to be very, very well versed in the law and build a very strong case about some high profile cases you may have seen recently. That is entirely due to the fact that we have been freed up to be able to work on those items because animal adoptions can be a very time-consuming thing, so it makes a lot of sense to continue this partnership. Of course, this welfare organization's core function is to match pets with responsible owners, and we wanted to continue that through an RFP process. So the current contract is with Concho Valley Paws. It was a 1-year agreement that expires February 28th. There was not an option to renew, so we had to go back out for a request for proposal, which is what we did late last year. So the proposal, of course, includes updated terms. The scope of service is largely unchanged. The programming that we were looking for, the services we were hoping to get provided are largely the same from last year to this year. Of course, to match animals with customers, provide adoption services, to host adoption events off-site as well as at the shelter itself. And when we launched this proposal, we did post it online, as we do with all of our purchasing items. We also talked about it with the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee. We also emailed a number of local vendors directly and certified mailed so that everyone would have that opportunity to respond. As I mentioned, the proposal includes updated terms, and what I mean by that is the years of service in the agreement. So the term is proposed at 1 year with 4 options to renew. So this could be as much as a 5-year agreement. The cost that's proposed at this time in the response that we received from Contra Valley Paws, that was the only response that we received, is unchanged at $60,000 annually, which of course is within the animal services budget. So for that timeline, of course, we first took it to the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee in December for them to review the request for proposal to make sure, because they make sure that we're compliant with state law. So that would fall into things such as making sure that all of our animals are spayed-neutered, all of them are microchipped, all of them have their rabies vaccination, make sure that we're housing the animals in accordance of the standards of care set forth by the state health code, and they did agree that that was happening. Contra Valley Paws has developed a full process of how that works, and we have a great confidence in that process. Since there were no changes from the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, we did publish that request for proposal on that Friday, December 15th. So that meant that responses were due January 5th, or almost 3 weeks, to be able to develop those responses. The subcommittee met January 17th, and of course the subcommittee was made up of myself, Bob Salas, Director of Neighborhood and Family Services, as well as Ryan Smith, who's the chairman of the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee. So we did have that representation. Then, of course, we're here today at council consideration. Our goal for that timeline was to be in advance of this contract expiring February 28th. The city would be in very difficult straits if we let this contract lapse, just that we don't have the staff to support that any longer. As I've mentioned, we have filled our animal control positions. We are focused on animal disease control in the shelter as well as outside the shelter. It is a full-time job keeping animal control at the correct level. Many of y'all have reached out to me for animal control issues that still need to be addressed, and I agree. We have a number of neighborhoods where animals are at large constantly. We have a number of bite cases that are never reported to us, and so we still need to continue to ramp up that service and make sure that we're providing a level of excellence, a standard of service that I would say is appropriate. And to do that, I very much agree with continuing an adoption services contract like the one before you. So that's what I've prepared today. I did want to speak a little bit to Contra Valley Paws' practice. They are here, of course, if there's any questions for the respondent. But for their adoption process, it's a very involved process, meaning that you come to the shelter, you come to one of the adoption events, you meet an animal that you like, you go through a very rigorous application process. References are checked, landlords are checked to make sure that you are able to have this animal. Paws schedules the spay-neuter surgery. We microchip the animal before it leaves the premises, so we have an intake of all of that. The family is actually considered a foster for Paws, meaning they don't actually own the pet until that spay-neuter surgery is complete. It is approximately 30 plus days out to get these veterinary appointments because the veterinarians are so backed up with their own service. So we do send an email reminder out a week before the surgery date so that folks know, hey, remember, we told you about this surgery date. It's very important that you make your date. There is on occasion that someone misses their appointment. So we reach out to them at that point. Paws does and says, hey, remember, this is a very important thing. You've got to get your animal in for the spay-neuter surgery. If someone misses, the vets call Paws immediately and says, hey, so-and-so is supposed to be here by 8:30. They're not here. That does happen occasionally. We do reschedule it and reemphasize that with the families. In the very rare event that a family fails to comply, there's been in excess of 1,000 adoptions since this contract took place March 1st. In the very rare event that a family fails to comply, they fail to make their appointment, they fail to return calls, they fail to do whatever it takes, in Paws adoption contract, it states that that animal reverts back to Paws. You have to comply with local ordinance. You have to comply what's going on as an adopter. And there's been about 4 instances where Paws has gone to the family's home and says, this is our animal now, you have to give it back. And they do. Without incident, we take those animals back in custody. Again, 4 out of 1,000 adoptions have escalated to that level. One did escalate a little further, and animal control actually seized the animal with our additional authority under under the city. And so very rare occurrence of that happening, but we do take those animals back in custody. At any given time, we have less than a dozen or so animals that are waiting on their spay-neuter surgery simply because they were recently adopted and they're just waiting on that surgery date. And so that does happen. We also do a reconciliation on my part, meaning that PAWS is talking to me about those that are outstanding and needing their second visit or follow-up appointment. We also do a billing reconciliation because, of course, adopters pay me, the city, for that adoption fee. We pay for their rabies vaccination through the veterinarians. We provide the microchipping service, so that's a cost to my department, and we pay for the spay-neuter surgery. So as I'm getting those billings in from the veterinarians, I'm reconciling it with PAW's list of outstanding pets needing to be spay-neutered. So we have a great confidence in the Concho Valley PAW's agreement as a whole. It's a daily seamless interaction of the tasks needed at the shelter, needed with adoption services, and we lean on each other both very heavily. And I think that it's a terrific option for the council to consider at this time.
Just to ask for clarification, it says the current contract with Concho Valley PAWS expires February 28th, 2017.
Oh, my apologies, it's 2018.
So it's 2018, so we need that correction in there.
Yes, thank you.
And then I know that I have received a lot of emails from individuals who believe that the too many pets are being left out or sent out for adoption without the neuter spray, and that there is a large volume of cancellations with the veterinarians on those, quote, foster/adopted, available for adoption pets. Can you give us any true statistics in terms of what the amount of cancellations have occurred with veterinarians?
Sure. The number of cancellations and reschedules with veterinarians are a pretty rare occurrence. It's an occasional item. I may defer to PAWS about how many of those are happening a week. The veterinarians may also see, there is the unfortunate circumstance that I get a tremendous number of puppies through my facility, and in the event that they become ill and don't survive their illness, for example, with parvovirus, we take every effort that they don't contract it in our facility, but there is an incubation period where they may have it and we don't know it and adopt it out to a family. And so in the event that that animal passes away, which unfortunately is pretty frequent, those spay-neuter appointments are canceled as well. And so as far as the number, it's an occasional occurrence. It's not a regular occurrence.
Okay, so in fact, then you would say that there it says that City Shelter reported a live release rate of 49% from 2016 to 2017. Would that be a number that would be correct?
That sounds about right. And that's a good point that, you know, in our most dire times at the animal shelter, the live release rate was anywhere from 10 to 20%. It was a difficult time, meaning that if you did come in to adopt an animal, it stayed at the shelter until its spay-neuter surgery date, which meant that if animal welfare groups came into, for myself, speaking for myself in a prior life, when I would come in to pull animals for a foster care for my animal welfare group, I would walk the general population and half the facility would already be adopted. It would be very limited in what's still left there available for adoption. There are folks they're taking up, our live inventory, so to speak, is taking up valuable space. They're waiting for their spay-neuter date, while other folks are having to be considered for euthanasia. And so in that time frame, we were experiencing a live release rate of 10 to 20%. You saw that in fiscal year 17, I believe, are the numbers you're quoting. There was a tremendous increase in our live release rate. For the month of December 2017, I just presented to the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee that our live release rate was 70%. That's almost 2 years into the no-kill initiative. And so what that means to me is this process is working. If there were a tremendous number of animals being released to the public unaltered, I would see that in litters of puppies. I would see an increase in my number of intake, and I'm not seeing that. But I also have this tremendous trust in this process that we've developed, where there's a reconciliation and we know who's still outstanding for their surgery and who's not. So we've got to keep rotating this live inventory quickly out of the shelter to further the no-kill initiative. That if it's the intent of the council to continue this program, I can't keep the animals on the premises until their surgery date because it is so far out.
And there's no way to move up, working with the vets, to move up the actual neuter sprayed appointment
I will say that we're not afraid to beg for those appointments. We do have a constant communication with the veterinarians that we work with to say, this one's in urgent need, we've got to move it up, or how can we just have some standing appointments with you? It's a constant communication to have those surgery dates as soon as possible, but that's still what we're left with is a month out for surgeries quite often.
So right now, you would say the standard for releasing an animal unneutered to someone and their appointment with the vet is 30 days, within a
About
30-day window.
Most often, yes, ma'am.
And we don't have the ability to set a standard appointment with these vets so that whenever we release an animal, we automatically already have a date
I
to
believe
fill
the
that
problem,
hole. You know?
Right. And we do that to some extent. For example, in August, we had a tremendously successful adoption event with the Clear the Shelter adoption event. We had a record number of adoptions in August. It was double our normal amount. We had 399 adoptions in the month of August alone. And we did have some surgery dates already lined up, but the problem arises with a female spay versus a male neuter is a quite different procedure for a veterinarian to undertake. A large dog versus a small cat, they need to know those things for their scheduling. It's difficult to just block out time and dedicate it to the shelter because then going into September, October, adoptions may have slowed down a little bit. And if they're still holding those surgery dates for us, they're losing money at that point. So it's a tenuous balance, and we plan ahead to the most that we can.
Those number of adoptions, how would that relate to the same time period the year before,
In fiscal year
2016?
16, adoptions were about 1,600. In fiscal year 17, they approached 1,700. They almost certainly would have been more, except for the distemper outbreak in April and May that really diminished our capability of adopting out healthy pets.
I have been told that Waco, Texas has a live release rate of about 93% if you compare it to us. Have we looked at what other cities' policies, procedures, and their release rate in terms of spray, neuter, etc.?
I haven't looked at Waco
compares?
specifically, but I have compared to other cities. We're always looking to do better and better and do more and more. I think the biggest hindrance in our no-kill initiative was we decided to take this on almost 2 years ago. Our budget has remained entirely flat, understandably so, from the council for the sales tax that we were facing at the time. Our facility is completely unchanged, and our staffing is unchanged. We don't have more staff. And so when you look at facilities like Waco, I do know that they have, for example, outdoor kennel runs, so they can hold some animals for longer. That's not something that me and my staff are comfortable with our extreme heat of summer and the cold winter days that we've had. Is that better for the animal? You could argue it either way. And so there's a tremendous investment in the no-kill initiative. And whether that comes from private dollars or public dollars, it can happen a variety of ways, but it's a continued investment in spay-neuter, which I do not have. We do rely heavily on PAWS for that. I do occasionally get donations, but to have a steady revenue stream that's invested in spay-neuter is the way that you get a live release rate. When I look at other facilities like us that are achieving a 90% live release rate, they do have a veterinarian on staff. They do have a medical ward. They do have vet techs on staff that are daily assessing these animals and keeping them as healthy as possible. Unfortunately, we have animals that are contracting communicable diseases that I have to be forced to consider euthanizing for the rest of the health of the general population. These are diseases that you could probably treat if it was your own pet, but I don't have the capability for culling them out from the herd, so to speak, and preventing the rest of the population from getting those illness. And so that would be the next step in-house, would be to have somewhere to isolate animals that have very treatable diseases, treat them, and then place them up for adoption after the fact. That would be a tremendous investment in our facility, as well as staffing to be able to implement something like that. But that is what I see at other cities who do have that 90% live release rate.
I know at one point we had a vet on duty at the shelter. Is that something that you feel worked well, didn't work well, or why did we change that policy?
I do think that the veterinarian on staff is key for something like this. I think that we had planned on funding, there's two rules of thought that go with the no-kill initiative. One, you've reduced adoption fees so that you can move pets out very quickly. But the funding for the veterinarian was based on, right now I collect $85 for the adoption of a dog, for example. 65 of that is to pay for the spay-neuter. So if we were instead keeping those funds, that can fund our own veterinarian, right? Well, when you reduce adoption fees, I don't have that $65. And so the funding wasn't there to rehire the veterinarian when he gave his notice. I wasn't involved in that process when that job turned over, but from a finance perspective, that's what I was aware of, was that we'd planned to fund it with adoption fees, but you reduce adoption fees so you can move the animals out very quickly. We had these two warring factions going on. Do we move the animals out quickly, or do we try to make a dollar? The most important thing is to get those animals in homes as soon as possible.
My last question, and then I'll let somebody else speak, is we don't open up the kennels to the public like many other shelters do for people to actually come back and take a look at the animals. Is there a reason we choose to continue with that policy versus other shelters?
Sure, and that's a really good question. We started it because for the health and wellness of our animals. We were seeing a tremendous spread of disease from one animal to the next, that if we had an animal with a slight illness, it was passed along to everybody as a family goes through and touches this dog to this dog to this dog. I had my doubts about if that was something we needed to continue. I will say this, when folks come in to adopt from us, I get no complaints about, well, why don't you check out our pets at this kiosk right here online instead of looking at them in the back. I get no complaints. I do not have any adopters that say, I'm leaving because I can't see the pets where they are. On a daily basis, folks say, oh, what a great idea. Let me continue that process. In addition to that, as part of the no-kill initiative is my facility is set up where you have the general population with 120 kennels. I also have a number of quarantine rooms for those of y'all that have been able to come and have a tour and see my facility. I have a quarantine room just for animal health. I have a quarantine room for wildlife. Well, I don't house wildlife on the premises anymore. I have a number of quarantine rooms, probably half a dozen quarantine rooms. What we're winding up doing in those rooms is we're keeping adoptable pets in there. As part of the no-kill initiative, if I have a very healthy adoptable Chihuahua, but I don't have room in general pop for her, I'm going to find a place for her. So even if you could go back and walk the general population, you still wouldn't see all our adoptable pets. So being able to view them in one place online is really the way that you're going to see the animal you're going to ultimately fall in love with. Having the access to the back doesn't provide better viewing of the animals, in my opinion.
Certainly many animal shelters do allow that, so how do they manage that?
A variety of ways. For example, the city of Abilene, their shelter is wide open. You can walk the rows, you can walk their quarantine rooms, you can walk everything. But they have a tremendous rate of illness and a live release rate I wouldn't strive for. So it works in a variety of ways.
If I like animal A, and I've looked on the photos and I like animal A, do you then bring animal A to the lobby for me to see this pet one-on-one?
Correct. We have a socialization room, and so you would meet that pet at that time. For example, even if you have another dog and you want to make sure the two dogs get along, you can do that in the socialization room. You can bring your whole family up, and you may say, well, I looked at Animal A online. I thought he was smaller. Let me look at Animal B now, and the PAWS staff and volunteers, which I do want to point out, this contract states that they're going to provide X number of staff. They easily provide double that but due to private funding. So they have a full staff of folks to be able to say, how's it going with Animal A? Do you have any questions about her? No problem, I'll bring out Animal B. We'll swap it out for you. You just wait here in the socialization room. We'll be glad to bring that animal out for you.
Where do you put the wild animals?
We don't bring in wild animals in the facility. We house primarily cats, dogs, and livestock. So any wild animals, we reach out to the game warden, we reach out to a wildlife rehabilitator who's permitted through the state, or we relocate them in the field. We recently had a wildlife standard operating procedure go to the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee because we were getting a lot of input from the state about how to do that correctly. And so I think the best thing for a raccoon, for example, is not to bring them in my facility. They're a wild animal. They deserve to be in their wildlife natural area. If they're too sick or injured to do that, we contact a wildlife rehabilitator. In the event that they can't be rehabilitated or it's something beyond that individual's needs, we do have to consider euthanasia at that point. keeping a sick or injured wildlife in my facility is not the best thing for the animal, in our opinion.
Thank you, Morgan. Lane, I think you wanted some questions or answers or comments.
Part of it, all my questions were, not all of them, but portion of my questions were answered through your presentation. Before we vote on this, I've heard the concerns of the spay and neuter rates on adoptions also. Partial, that was answered, along with concerns about the open shelter. I'd like to explore that, maybe have certain days to where it is open to where the general public can go back there and view it all at once in the kennels. We're down to crunch time with the expiration of this contract, and we only had one agency to respond to the RFP. Have we thought about exploring a working relationship between all agencies for a volunteer program? That way they would rotate. I know I've discussed this in the past before. That way $60,000 of the taxpayer money isn't going to an agency to adopt out the strays that are in the shelter. That could potentially help pay for the vet service. I'm not sure what that number is, what we were paying in the past to have a vet on hand along with 2 vet techs. That way we can kind of work towards that facility that the mayor was talking about. But have we discussed that? Has the board discussed that?
Excuse me. To speak to that, I guess the first question I'll speak to is the cost. The $60,000 contract fee to Contra Valley Paws is less than what the cost to fund a veterinarian was. Right. To have a veterinarian and 2 vet techs, I think would exceed $200,000 pretty quickly. Thank you. And to speak to your next question, I think we did have a very healthy system of rotating volunteers from multiple agencies in and out. I think that it had mixed results. We had a lot of success with it, but we also saw a way to very much streamline it. The efficiencies gained by allowing me and my staff to focus on animal control are that I can hand over to animal adoption services and walk away from it. It's just on an as-needed basis that the Contra Valley Paws staff brings something to my attention, or vice versa, I bring something to their attention if we have an injured animal in the field and we need to seek emergency medical. I have one point person to go to for that. I need one agency managing my inventory, so to speak, where they know this is an animal we've already invested in. This animal's slated for transport in 48 hours. We want to make sure that that animal goes there. It's been through a long process to get approved for that. And so we do have it wide open. We have about 9 different agencies that are working with Contra Valley Paws to pull for animals from us. We've had in excess of 400 animals pulled and transferred to other rescues in this time frame of this contract, and that's the only way to further this no-kill initiative. I only have a finite number of adoptions that can happen in any given year here, and so to be able to have one point person that knows my whole inventory, knows the history on them, knows who's been medicated, who's slated for this different thing, who already has an adoption on him, and then work subordinately with those folks to be able to say, I have a subcontract with Texas Cattle Dog Rescue. They come in and look at this cattle dog. Absolutely, I think that's a really good fit for y'all. We'll go ahead and do that transfer at this time. That is the only way that it allows me and my staff to not manage this contract as a full-time job, to be able to manage animal control as a full-time job. That's something I feel pretty strongly about, that's working very well for the tax dollars.
Has the rate of pulling from the shelter from other agencies increased, decreased, stayed stable after the contract has been signed a year ago?
It's increased tremendously because of the number of animals that we're able to transport to facilities who were us 10 years ago. They went no-kill 10 years ago. They've made a tremendous investment in spay-neuter in their community. They need the adoptable pet inventory.
Through PAWS or the other agencies in town?
There's about 9 different agencies pulling out from under the PAWS umbrella. And PAWS has developed those agreements, has direct contracts with those folks, and works those arrangements regularly. So if I approach PAWS and say, I've got to move some dogs, I don't have enough space, our intake is way up, they say, great, let me work on something. I've got some contacts already lined up, and they do. And we have a call to arms, so to speak, for anybody to come forth and do that. I see this as a system that's really working.
What is our kill rate?
For the month of December, our live release rate was 70%. So our kill rate, so to speak, would be right at 30%. And for November, the month month before that, it was 69%. So I think that for fiscal year 18, y'all will see a tremendous increase in our live release rate. Of course, no kill is defined as a 90% or better live release rate. And to be able to get as far as we've gotten, again, and I'm not beating the council over the head with this by any means. I very much understand the financial situation, but just to say that with no increase to our budget, with the facility as is, which admittedly needs a tremendous amount of improvements, and with our staffing as is, to be able to get to a 70% live release rate in December is a tremendous thing to be able to brag on for y'all to report back to your citizens.
What do most animal shelters kill rate?
It really runs the gamut. It's difficult to say on average because there are a number of very forward-thinking communities who have said, I want to invest in our animal shelter. This is an important issue for our community. Make it happen. Do whatever it takes to get to 90%. There's also a number of facilities, you'll see us particularly in your smaller communities, that say, I'm holding the animals for a 3-day stray hold, and if nobody claims them, unfortunately, we'll euthanize at that time. If you visited, for example, the animal shelter in Sterling City, it's a very small facility, and they simply exist to be a lost and found service. So it really runs the gamut.
Bob?
Actually, nationally, it's 60% kill rate. So it's a 40% live relief rate nationally. Texas is pretty close to that as well. So we're below the nation in euthanasia. So.
Yes, Lane?
More. I'll agree that something needs to be done within this year, and since we already had just one agency respond to the RFP, we're going to have to, bridge that gap somehow for the adoptions. I would kind of urge staff to look at a collaboration between all 9 agencies to get that volunteer rotating schedule. Maybe set up a subcommittee between those with a head from each one that you can go to as your go-to guy to just go to limit how many people you're responding to. That way we can free up that $60,000 per year. I know that doesn't cover the $200,000, but that would go towards it. Maybe we can look at how much, what we can do to bridge that later on, but that's a start. So that's what I would probably say that we need to look forward to doing in the future. I don't know if everybody's in agreement or not, but that's how I feel.
Gary, I think you'd like to say something.
Thank you. I would. I was not going to weigh in on this because I spend some time out there with Morgan in the animal shelter and have gone through all the improvements that we've made since July of last year. But I will have to say this. That $60,000 probably is well spent so that we can concentrate on getting more officers on the street and getting these pets back into the shelter and making sure that we comply with the ordinances so that we get these pets spayed, neutered, microchipped, and all of our shots and get them adopted out. Now, one of the things we talk about is trying to reach a no-kill or 90% adoptable out. Is that you got to remember that we're picking up a lot of rabid animals in this community too that have to be put down. I'm talking about foxes and skunks and all kinds of things that citizens are trapping and then taking to the shelter. That counts as kill. We're not talking about typical adoptable pets. So when we start talking about animals, and it's a very, very animals and kids are two of those things that are very, very passionate. People want to work around those things. So we want to make sure that citizens understand that we are better today than we were a year ago. We're better today than we were 90 days ago, and we are going to get better in 2018. But I think we really need to make sure that unless we have an open-ended budget, that Morgan can hire more people out there, then we've got to have some help. And I'm certainly disappointed, as Lane has said, that there was only one agency that bid on this. I spent plenty of time a year ago with some of these agencies because they felt like they didn't have that opportunity. Well, they had an opportunity this time. I mean, I don't understand why they didn't bid, but they had that opportunity. And quite honestly, I'd like to make sure that we have as many pets adopted out, regardless of whether it's San Angelo or some other community that we transport these animals to. But we want to get to that particular spot. So this $60,000, I think, is well spent.
Thank you.
I'll-
Let me ask a question. He brought up a statistic that said that raccoons and foxes and those people are in the kill statistics. I would assume our kill statistics are about adoptable animal statistics, not all animals.
No, ma'am, it's the use of any time we make a use of the pentobarbitol, we have to report that as a euthanasia, and it does report on our monthly reports.
So can you give us a number to separate those? Because obviously you have the statistics because you know what went down about just dogs and cats, if you will, versus wild animals plus dogs and cats, because I think that's a number that we really want to think about and know about. And then the other thing that I would like to see us do is that the problem with an animal shelter is lack of public responsibility towards animals, pets, etc. And I think we need to make sure that we go on a big public information campaign, Anthony Wilson, wherever you are, because really the reason we have an animal shelter and the reason we have the problem is lack of public personal responsibility towards pets, and that creates the problem that we have. So we need to be more aggressive about public awareness, the public, because you exist because of the problem of the public not doing their job and their responsibility. So we don't want to keep putting more pressure on you. We've got to make people more responsible and aware, just like we do on conservation and other issues. This needs to become a very big point that we work on and try to put some guilt out there towards animals and taking care of our animals. Lane, did you have something else?
I'll agree with Harry that the 60,000 is very well spent. It's just how it's being spent, if there's any other methods that we can explore to free up our staff and go out for animal control. Like I said, we're down on crunch time. The contract is going to expire. We're going to have to vote on something now to bridge that within this next year, but it's something for us to look on for the future.
Do I have further questions? Yes. Please, Tom.
Morgan, what's our capacity? It's 300, and I mean for pets, how many can you hold?
It's a fluid number. It's not defined by the state as a specific limit, but when we get to 290 pets on the premises, I get very nervous. And that depends very greatly on, you know, if they were all large breed dogs, it's much less than that. It's probably 100.
How often do we get close to that number throughout the year?
Probably 7 months of the year we're approaching that number.
Absolutely.
It's regular. And
and at that point, you make calls, say, hey, I've got an overload, and you make calls to people to come, and we literally ship, you know, van loads and large loads of dogs out for people to take over to maintain, you know, our no-kill initiative. I think you're doing a wonderful job, okay? So $60,000 well spent. It's a matter of also the assets that are coming. I've gotten tons of emails and lots of questions from other people with concerns, but we have an animal control facility that, you know, for our population, it will never fit any one person's concerns. My question is, how many hours do you spend out there a week? Every time I go by, you're out there, so don't be afraid to tell me how many hours you spend.
I supervise animal services as well as WIC. I do a lot to support WIC, but I'm officing at the shelter doing that support of WIC. I'm physically at the WIC office maybe 2 hours a week, but I'm working 40 plus hours. Well, I don't want to be perceived as complaining, but for all of them, all of my hours are at the shelter.
I mean, anytime I go out there and drive by, you're there. I think you're doing a wonderful job with the assets you have. We talked about some things that'd be great for the future, things we probably need to discuss with Roland as far as developing a facility that might be a show facility that we could just keep that. It's a matter of animal health. It's a matter of disease control. And all of those things combined, I think you're doing an outstanding job. We put this bid out. We got one person that came in and met the bid. With that, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
You have a list, Morgan, of those people who are willing to take a van of 30 animals up to Michigan or wherever.
Yeah, yes, I could provide y'all with a list.
I don't need it. I just want to make sure that you have an ongoing list of volunteers.
Usually one volunteer.
Okay.
We have a tremendous support from some very passionate folks who will drop everything on a dime to drive to Nebraska at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's a tremendous, and I make one statement to Contra Valley Paws, hey, we got to do something, and then they put into motion a tremendous deployment of resources that's something that the city could never duplicate. It's not the kind of support that we could ever garner or be able to build. It's got to be a 501c3 to a 501c3 that I see that those relationships are very valuable.
So we want to also put a call out there for more volunteers with vans that can help us take animals.
Oh, we have the van. We just need the time.
Okay, so we just need more volunteers who can come load up a van and take animals where there's some adoptable openings and keep that going, because that's the other thing that I think you need tremendous amount of support on. And again, we're asking the public to help partner with us and you to ensure that we can reduce the kill rate by getting these animals to locations where adoptions are viable. All right.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Morgan, a few minutes ago, the mayor made a point that those gross animal figures included animals which might not be adoptable. Do you have an idea for example, maybe in December, what that would look like what those statistics would look like if you only included adoptable animals?
If I had to guess, our live release rate at that point would have been in excess of 90%. I know at least 200 of the euthanasias that we did in December were feral cats that did not belong to a colony, which of course is what we check before we euthanize. And that alone, much less the wildlife, we would identify those pets as not adoptable, unable to return back to a colony or a caregiver. And so if you excluded those alone, we would be there.
And that's what I want to make sure that we're looking at and digging into the numbers to make sure that the communication we have makes people better understand what we're doing. Just as you just explained it, it helps better paint a better picture of what's going on out there. And I think the public needs to know that. And it's an important statistic. So please keep those numbers going, because that's what we want to talk about.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
one
Tommy?
quick question. We haven't really gone down this path. Morgan, it seems pretty obvious to me, based on a couple of things you've said. The facility needs some help. That takes money. Not today, because you may not know. If you do, you can state. But I would like to see kind of let's just say a low, medium, and high. Some things that maybe the council could do to help you at the facility in terms of upgrades. There may be a very minimal thing that would have an exponential or maybe almost exponential impact on the way it operates for the benefit of the citizens, and then maybe a middle ground and the gold-plated. I just, I don't need that in the next week, 2 weeks, whatever. Just, next 60 days, something like that, just to give us, because obviously we're closer to budget than we were the last meeting. So just to give us an idea of what we might be looking at to help you do your job better, help the public better, help the health and safety of the animals better. So when you have some time.
Yes, sir. And just to speak to that point is I couldn't intelligently provide you those figures. And so we were able to capture some budgetary savings from last year to hire an engineer that is well-versed in these issues to be able to come and tell me the things you're asking for. And so we have already had our first visit with that individual and hope to hear back from them soon on what can be phased in, what's a big deal, what's not a big deal, those items. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions from council for Morgan? If not, do I have a motion?
So move to approve
Second.
as presented.
And there's a second?
Second, yes.
Second. Thank you. Do I have public comment at this point in time? If I do, please come forward to the microphone, state your name and your association, if there is one, and you're on.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jenny Wilson with Contra Valley Paws, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to let you know how much Paws has enjoyed being a part of this tremendous movement in our community as we move towards a no-kill San Angelo. It's been something that many of us in the community have dreamed about and wished for a very long time, and to see it start to come into fruition is very encouraging. I've been in rescue for 9 years, and I started rescue when the kill rate in this community was 82%. We were challenging Houston for one of the highest kill rates in the state of Texas. So when I say we started at the very bottom, we started at the very bottom. I'd like to commend the incredible work that Morgan has done, and also commend my staff and our volunteers at PAWS, because I think that we have done a good job for you in this past year for the $60,000. Your investment in this partnership provides for 2 full-time employees to be at the shelter at all times. PAWS is literally matching that. We have at least 4 people at the shelter throughout the week. We do all of the weekend events, and the adoptions, I believe, are very successful by far and large, by very successful overall. However, there is the occasion when we book out an appointment, has been brought to your attention. When we book out an appointment for an adopted pet a month out, that owner may forget about that appointment. We do our best to remind them. There is a second appointment booked. If they are not in compliance, we start action on redeeming that animal back into our program for adoption again. So we, out of the 1,300 adoptions we've done in our calendar year, I think we have 4 outstanding that we're working on. So I think the numbers speak to them, for themselves as how successful this has been. We've also been able to, as Morgan mentioned, purchase a very large transport van, and that is what we use to transport these animals from San Angelo to areas in the Midwest. All of the rescues that we work with in the Midwest, we have physically visited their location to ensure that they are reputable rescues. Most of them have veterinarians on staff. So we were able to send in the neighborhood of 400 last year animals to them, and this year we're hoping to send about 1,000 in that direction or more. The transports are driven by our volunteers, and we raise money to cover the vetting that those animals require to travel across state lines. So it's a constant, it's a constant flowing, evolving program, and we're very, very proud of that because there is a finite number of adoptions that we can do in this community. So getting them out of here and getting them spayed and neutered is our priority. Having said that, it is within our strategic plan this year to hire our own veterinarian. And if we are able to achieve that, which we actually start the interview process this afternoon, we hope to come to the city again and say, hey, we've got a veterinarian. How can we utilize this person to further our joint mission, which is to reduce this population through spay and neuter? So I just kind of wanted to bring you up to date with some of the things that we have, and again, offer my appreciation to you for all that you do and your support of what we've done this year. And I'm always available if there's any questions. I've reached out to some of you throughout the year last year just to kind of establish that communications. Please call me if there's ever any questions or you have concerns, because we want to be proactive. We want to be successful in this venture.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? Come on, wait to get to the microphone, dear.
John Strickland. I'm Misty's owner from last summer. And she was taken to the shelter in minimal medical condition. She wasn't scanned and she was euthanized. She was not scanned. And then they made some excuse about that the address was wrong or whatever. They didn't call the volunteer fire department in Grape Creek to send somebody to the address because they would have found her or whatever, stuff like that. But what I would like to see is euthanization accountability. Maybe a program where they could take a picture and a note of every dog that they kill or whatever. And God bless the soul, the person has to review all those. But I would like that, some accountability. And I know when I adopted a dog since, and they said she was fixed. She's not fixed, and that's okay with me because I know how to take care of my dog. But I'm here to promote euthanization accountability, a photo and an app. I drive an 18-wheeler and I got people that drive for me. When they have some break, they take a picture and send me a picture, and I know what it is.
But off topic here.
Okay, just stay focused, if you would, on this PAWS contract.
Okay, and I think that PAWS is a good thing. I don't think that whenever Paul's Jenny backed out of the committee meeting last year, and sat in the audience and wasn't allowed her to convene, the quorum convened because there was a bunch of people there. She sat in the audience and the meeting wasn't allowed. All those people were there to be heard. And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, she's back on the board. That's the only thing, that I don't even understand how that happened, because you got 50 people outside and a board, but it's not allowed to convene, And I think she's got a good heart. I love her. But when you play games with the system, that's not right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Further public comment? Any more comments from the public? If there's no further comments from the public, then we will take a vote on the contract as presented, awarding PAWS the contract for 2018 as presented.
Mayor, one more question for Morgan before we go. Our processes and procedures have changed since the euthanasia of Misty, correct?
Tremendously, yes, sir.
Do I have a motion? Motion and a second. We had public comment. We're doing the vote now, sorry. All in favor of accepting the contract as presented, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Item B, update on CIP street improvement projects in preparation for the next round of bond funding. And Russell?
Good morning, everyone. All right, so I'm here to give an update on our capital improvement street rehab projects. And before I do that, I just want to give everybody kind of a background of how we got to this point. And this time in 2016, or January of 2016, we developed a 10-year plan to rehabilitate our major arterial and collector streets throughout San Angelo. And how we came up with that was through a detailed study that we had done on all of the city streets that was completed in November of 2015. And through that study, we prioritized the streets based on, or gave every street kind of a baseline rating. And part of that study, we did came up with estimated construction costs for each of the streets to rehabilitate those, as well as came up with what we needed to, the funding source and the dollars that we needed to do that and how that would be accomplished. So we came up with a 10-year plan where every 2 years we would come to council for, $16 million bond fund to focus on those specific streets that we came up with. And part of that plan too was, we came up with kind of our bigger streets that we really needed to focus on, and then we kind of, put in smaller streets too. So like our Bell Street, it's a really big project, and some of our other streets, but I'll get into that here in a second. So our year one plan included MLK from Loop 306 to 29th Street, Bell Street, which is a big street, from Old Ballinger Highway to Rio Concho, College Hills Boulevard from Loop 306 to Valley View, basically on the outside of the loop. Chadburn Street from 67 or the loop to Avenue L, which is kind of through our downtown area. And Southland Boulevard from Sherwood Way to that Walmart Street intersection. I'm sure most of y'all have seen the construction going on there. MLK and Bell Street were primarily put in there because, or at least MLK was put in there because of a grant that we had associated with that project, and we could better utilize those funds. Bell Street was a bigger project, and it was going to eat up a lot of that initial $16 million. College Hills, it was more of a smaller project, and we found that was going to be, our funds were going to be better utilized by getting in a smaller project in there and reaching that $16 million threshold. And to just give everybody an update as to where we're at with those projects, MLK is approximately 90% completed.
You know, the street is completed, but we still have some things like the sidewalks and traffic signals that we still need to update on that. Bell Street, we're scheduled to open bids later this month. We had originally scheduled to have it open earlier this month, but based on some questions that came up from contractors through the bidding process, we needed to address those and make some corrections to the plans, and needed to add some more time to get so that they could still have time to review that and get accurate estimates in for that. College Hills, it's scheduled to begin next month, the actual construction of that. Southland Boulevard is, like I said before, you know, we did that in conjunction with the Sherwood Way project that TxDOT had, and it's about 95% complete. Basically, all they're lacking on that are, you know, like striping and some odd end things like that. Chadburn Street through the downtown area is temporarily on hold due to we had a pretty large scope change on that. You know, we had originally looked at just doing a street rehabilitation project on that, but we found some grant dollars where we could also improve the pedestrian elements through that area, you know, make it much more pedestrian friendly. And so we're looking at that and working on that, kind of revamping on that specific project. Our year 3 plan is, which is what we're coming up for and you know, going to be moving forward on, is going to include North Chadburn from the Loop to 43rd Street, which will basically complete out the Chadburn project, or the Chadburn Street, getting it rehabilitated. Glenna and 29th Street from Loop 306 to North Bryant. That's another very long stretch. Sunset Drive from College Hills to Foster Road. Southwest Boulevard from Rockbrook to Twin Mountain, and Johnson Street from Sherwood Way to Avenue N. And just to update you where we're at on each of those, North Chadburn, we're approximately 30% complete with the design on that. The Glenna and 29th Street project, we're actually considering the use of the Benedetti machine, the repavement machine that we recently purchased, and using that to rehabilitate that street. Sunset Drive, we're about 20% complete, but we're designing that in-house, and you know, have a little more control of that and saving some money on that as well. Southwest Boulevard, that's actually been broken up into 2 phases. Phase 1 is from Rockbrook Drive to Twin Mountain Drive, kind of the southern portion of Southwest, and that design is about 95% complete. We just have some odd ends to tie up. You know, pretty much in the next month or 2, we'll be ready to put that project out for bid. Phase 2 would be from Rockbrook to all the way, you know, the rest of it that, you know, extends through the middle of town through Loop 306. That portion of that design is about 80% complete. Johnson Street, there again, it's from Sherwood Way to Avenue N. The design on that is about 20% complete as well, and we're doing that design in-house. And if you happen to be driving on Johnson Street yesterday, we were doing some geotechnical investigation on that street and had some portions of it blocked off throughout the day, and so we're moving right along on that project. Looking forward to our next phasing would be year 5. The streets that are included in that phasing are Cristobal Road from Paint Rock Road to South Chadburn. We're looking at College Hills, or the remainder of College Hills from Loop 306 to Avenue N, and that'll be kind of like another Bell Street project. You know, it'll be very big and take a lot of time and a lot of our bond fund dollars.
So year 5 is what year?
That would basically be 2020.
2020.
All right, and then Howard Street from Greenwood Street to Pecos Street, and Washington Street from Tewig to Chadburn. Currently, we've started the process into, you know, designing those streets. We've really just hit on College Hills Boulevard thus far, just because of the size of it and how long it'll take to get that design and get that completed. But we'll be looking at bringing that design, or we're actually looking at working with a consultant on that project just because of the size and the complexity of that project. But some of the things that we'll be looking at, are, the drainage, the utilities, and the actual street improvement. We're going to be looking at, and we'll go into more detail on that in the next meeting. But I'm looking forward to that project as well. All right. With that, do y'all have any questions?
Yes, Billy.
Russell, I have a question. In the year 3, Southwest, I believe, Southwest Boulevard is on there, I think, in year 3. But in the meantime, when there are potholes and things like that, do we do routine pothole filling
Correct,
until
yeah.
we get to this point?
Exactly, yes, and that's a good point. We do, we still need to maintain these, just like anything, you need to keep maintaining it until you actually rehab it. Kind of same thing with College Hills Boulevard. It's on the south portion, it's still in pretty good condition, and but we do want to maintain that, and that's why we did throw that into this funding cycle as well. Just so that it can be maintained, and then while we're working on the northern portion of College Hills, it'll still be maintained in good shape while we do go forward.
And one other question. I was unable to be here last Thursday at the CIP town hall meeting. I was at a training, but did we do any change in the priority update based on that town hall meeting?
No, we've pretty much kept everything prioritized the way we had it initially lined out in our cycle or our plan, and but that is the nice thing about this plan, is that it is fluid. If there are issues that come up, or if we do feel like we need to adjust that, we can do that at any point.
Russell, would you tell everyone what the process is if there is a big pothole, what they need to do to have it addressed?
Okay. They're more than welcome to contact the engineering department. Our number is 657-4201. They can also contact our operations department as well. Their operations is actually over Street and Bridge, or Street and Bridge department, that does the actual maintenance and upkeep of the streets. And I don't have their number handy, but Shane, their number is 657-4206. So,
Lane, do you have a comment, question?
Southwest Boulevard from Rockbrook, that's not addressing that uphill slope right there by McDonald's, where we have a lot of drainage issues when we have a big storm coming through. Are we looking at that?
correct. So we are looking at that. So what we did with the actual design of Southwest was we included not just this phasing from Rockbrook to Twin Mountain. We went ahead and included the entire stretch of Twin Mountain, the entire stretch of Southwest, and so we're already designing that. We'll have it ready to go once that funding, or once it comes into the plan. We'll be able to address it at that point. Kind of back to Billy's question about the plan. We can, if we need to reprioritize that street with another street, we can come back to that, and we'll be ready to go.
You brought up the Benedetti machine a minute ago. Can you give us an update on how well that's working, and any issues with it, and is it moving forward, and lots of work being done?
I'm going to have to defer that question to Shane. That's actually under his purview, and he's
Shane,
more
come on up.
educated on
Let
that.
me ask another question of Russell, and then you can answer it. We talked about work that is being done in-house versus outside engineering firms as consultants. Are we going to continue to pursue doing more in-house, because the expense of using outside engineering firms is very expensive, and the value in doing it in-house is dramatic? So I know that's always an issue of staffing and the ability of workload, but are we doing more in-house now than we would have been doing a year ago? Or is there a plan to make sure we continue to look at bringing more in-house to reduce the overall cost of engineering?
Mayor, if I may, actually.
Yes, please.
Because I did discuss this with Russell as well. We do want to make sure that we look at those engineering in-house services to kind of balance out. I know you had brought this up a few months, actually, when you first came in, and I addressed it with Russell. What we do want to make sure that we do is we do address it through the budget process and actually show how there could be an offset on actually doing the engineering in-house. Of course, we'd have to go through the whole process of hiring more engineers, but that is something that we're ready and prepared to discuss during the early phases of our budget process to make sure that we include that in there as well. I think that's a good idea.
Great. I think the more we can do in-house, the more money we can save by doing that, and the quality of work you produce. And you're right on site for people to ask questions or call in, so I think it's a very big, productive strategy. Thank you. Shane, did you have some information for us?
Yes, on the Benedetti machine, we've got it in, got trained, and we utilized it. We have, unfortunately, we've had some significant staff shortages in the last 90 to 120 days, which has really slowed us down on our progress with the Benedetti machine and moving forward as fast as we would like to. And of course, as we went through these last cold spells, we actually have to have the temperatures at the right levels before we can actually utilize the machine. But as we're moving forward, we are diligently working on our staffing, trying to get them back. We're going to actually ask the manufacturer of the machine to come back down and help us train as we're training our new staff that we're bringing in and getting hired. So as we're moving into these spring months and we start getting the weather to warm up, we really expect a strong push with the Benedetti machine as we're moving forward. So we believe that we are going to be able to make some headway and see some significant improvements in our roadways. So again, had a small setback that we really weren't expecting when we purchased it last summer, but as we're moving forward, we believe that we're going to be able to make some really nice strides moving forward in some of our streets. And hopefully the Glen of the 29th, as we talked about that one, looking at that one, really believe that there's some other large major collector streets in town that we can, instead of doing a traditional mill and overlay, that this machine will work on and save us significant dollars as we move forward.
Thank you, Shane. Council, do I have further questions or comments you would like to make? Somebody probably raised their hand and I didn't see it, so.
Russell, when the plan was initially done, everybody up here could ask a question, and we all obviously live in different areas of town, so we get different questions about different areas of town. So the area of town I live in, I get tons of questions on Southwest and College Hills. So two questions. Pretty much the same question. It appears that the section, you alluded to the College Hills, the southern portion there that y'all are getting ready to do. Is there a reason we didn't consider that northern section sooner than we are? It was in the 5-year plan, but, there's some pretty rough stuff on there.
Sure, and to it, that, all of our streets continue to deteriorate based on, from the original time we came up with a baseline of, the condition of all of our streets. So, kind of there again, $16 million only gets us so far. And a lot of our considerations were based on dollar amounts and, estimated construction costs. So what we tried to do was put those bigger projects in each of those phases and then slip in some of those smaller projects. And that's more or less exactly what happened with, College Hills, or the northern part of College Hills from Loop 306 to Avenue N, was that, it just, we had, Bell Street, obviously, we have Southwest, we have, all of our streets are in very bad condition. And, so that's just how it fell through, is at that point in time, based on the condition in 2015, where we put College Hills in that rotation. So
makes sense.
Does that answer your question?
Okay, thanks.
Lucy,
I was asking for the proverbial friend.
Lucy, long awaited.
No, I
My
just
apologies.
wanted to make a comment. I just wanted to make a comment about MLK. How great that road is. So if you get frustrated around San Angelo, go right down MLK, and it's really a nice street. But also everywhere we go or where I read, it's always Bell Street. People are really concerned about that street not being, or not even getting started on fixing it. So the sooner we can get to doing that, maybe the people will understand that we are actually doing something about it.
Is Bell Street going to happen? Actually, let's make sure that we make that clear. Is it going to
Bell
happen?
Street
Bell
will
Street is
happen.
going to happen. Yes, it is going to happen. We're opening bids on the 30th, so if you want to join me at City Hall, you're welcome to come hear those bid openings.
It's a party.
Yes, Harry?
Of course, I've heard about this since before I was ever elected to this position. But I remind citizens that we're going to get started on it by the summer. What I'm probably going to hear before the end of the year is how long are you going to do this? How long is it going to take till it's
Are we
finished?
there yet?
So I always remind people that it's a 3-year project, and I can guarantee you I'll field a lot of phone calls. You will too, Lucy.
Oh, yes.
A lot of phone calls. Why can't we get it done quicker than that?
Tom, did you have, I'm getting very sensitive to seeing people's things, so I don't want to offend anybody. Go.
Well, I'll throw this thing up here, and I want to take a chance to ask Shane a couple questions here right quick. When it comes to the Vendetti machine, you have to have a pretty much of a trained crew to operate that, correct? I mean, they're specialized?
Correct.
How hard is it to keep that crew?
It's been real hard here lately, especially when we're starting to see these old sand fracking company or the sand hauler companies coming in. They're really taking a lot of my staff. So, and as soon as I get a new truck driver trained, they can get a job for about $20,000 a year more than what we pay for. So,
and
so it's been tough to keep staff, and so we're constantly moving through, and of course the training it's pretty substantial on that piece of machinery. So, and it's been tough.
So if that thing can save us money, what I say is maybe y'all come back to us or come to council, and Rick and Michael look at this is developing a crew that is specialized with that and maintain them, and we have to compensate them appropriately for the job they're doing this so that you can retain them. Because I feel the problem you have retaining employees, and I see it in our roads, and I feel it in my truck every time I drive down them. So you may want to take that to staff and look about developing a specialized crew.
And Tom wants to be trained.
And Tom wants to.
Right after the rodeo.
Now, have I ignored anybody? Has everybody had an opportunity to speak and add to this conversation? Okay. Then do I have a motion?
Just to update.
Oh,
is
this
just
is
an
a
update.
presentation, so you're off the hot seat.
Yes.
Thanks, Russell.
Thank you. Item C, consider a resolution directing publication of notice of intention to issue combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation to provide funds for street improvement projects and resolving other matters relating to the subject. And Tina, you're on.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela. I'm Tina Deersky, Director of Finance, and we're going to talk now about funding the next round of street improvement projects. Our proposal today includes issuing not to exceed $16.7 million in certificates of obligation to fund the street reconstruction and improvements. They'll be amortized over a 20-year period. And I want to emphasize that the issuance of these bonds would not increase the tax rate. It is achievable within our existing debt service rate allocation. And then we would be coming back to you on March 6th to delegate the pricing officer, and we would go out for bids on the rates on March 8th. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
When you say issue of new certificates will not increase the interest and sinking property tax rate. What do you mean sinking property tax rate?
The part of our tax rate that's allocated for debt service. So the 9.36 cents of our 77.6 cents of the tax rate.
So on the spreadsheets that you did for us on this 2018 certificates, if you pull up page 1, and those numbers are up there. Are they on a slide?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So if we take a look at it, it says, okay, so you talk me through this spreadsheet. So it says that
on the far right,
on the far right, just take one line and start with line 8.
8.
The 4,927,393,457.
Okay.
And talk me through each line in terms of what that represents.
That is our taxable value of our appraised properties for the city, and that's what is multiplied times the tax rate to yield our property tax revenue.
So you're saying to fund this $16.5 million, 4.9 of our taxable property tax rate, and the taxes on that would be what funds this?
Yes.
Okay, so
9.36% that's allocated for debt service.
okay, so and you go across and it says estimated existing and proposed tax supported D/S debt service. I'm assuming D/S means, so that's 4,897,761, and then you have a $400,000 reduction.
That is a use of our existing fund balance in our debt service fund. So we have about, I think it's $1.3 million in available in our fund balance right now, and we will use $400,000 of that to front load the debt to decrease our future debt obligation.
So the interest that we would be paying on this $16.5 million over the life of the 20 years would be what?
At an estimated rate of 3.48%, the total interest we would pay would be $6.8 million. It's at the bottom of that column that says interest.
So that is the 6.8.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. As I said, we'll be going out, we go out for bids on that interest rate. We'll do that on March 8th and see who comes back with the lowest interest rate for that.
Okay. And does somebody, before I move forward with another question, does anybody have a question before I continue?
I just like to move to move to approve this as presented.
Second that motion.
Is there any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any seconds? I guess no second.
Oh,
That was a vote.
That was
that was a vote.
I'm getting too much into my presentation here. Thank you very much. All right, D, first public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the 2017-18 budget for grants, donations, and capital projects.
Okay, so this is a budget amendment that we bring to you, and we need council approval for the amendment. First, we have the settlement for the 2013 Seal Coat contract. That's from operations. They are receiving the settlement amount of $400,000, and we'll budget that to complete additional Seal Coat projects in this current year. Next, we have some revenue from the cell towers that council approved a while back. They have received to date $4,500 and would like to budget that revenue so that they can purchase some new computers for staff. Next, we have rifle-resistant body armor grant for the police department. They would like to budget the amount that they have been awarded, and of course, correlating expenditure for those for that body armor. Next, we have property and casualty insurance legal settlement. Council did approve that legal settlement in executive session on December 12th, and so that will be a drawdown of fund balance to make that payment. Next up, we have the Kirby Park Rain Capture Project. That is a grant, or I think it's a donation actually, pardon me, that was received for the rain capture project at Kirby Park. So they will budget the revenue of $25,000 in our designated revenue fund and a corresponding expenditure. Next is the Adaptive Recreation League donation from, I believe his name is Alex Vega. He's the washer pitching gentleman that comes for our Riverfest, and he donated that amount for the Adaptive Recreation League. And finally, we have two amendments for Cosa DC. We will be budgeting revenue. When we budgeted revenue for Cosa DC initially, their sales tax revenue did not correlate to what the city budgeted on our side. So we're going to increase that budget, especially now that we're seeing numbers greater than that. We feel very comfortable that that's a conservative amount. So we'll increase their revenue to match what the city budgeted at the beginning of the year. Also, we'll budget West Texas Water Partnership. There'll be an increase there to correspond to what the water department budgeted on their side. And they had some an increase in debt service, and so we're budgeting for that as well.
You want to talk through
Those
that
are
because
on
that's
the
a
ballot
huge
side. Yes,
yeah, it's a
ma'am.
huge difference between revenue and expense. You want to talk through that and give us a little more details?
Yes, so the first co-CDC item there is ballot, so there's not a whole lot of fluctuation with that one. The second one is on the economic development side. $2 million of that is for phase 2 at the industrial park. That will be a drawdown of fund balance. Another $1.5 million is for a project at Goodfellow. That it will also be a drawdown of fund balance. The other items are pretty minimal, but that makes up $3.5 million of that 3.6.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Do I have questions for Tina from council?
Approve. Second.
Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the 2017 and 18 budget for grants, donations, and we just did that one.
Yes, ma'am.
Combined, right? All right, so item E, update on sales tax revenue.
Bring us some good news.
Sales taxes up 12.45% in January compared with the same month last year. Our collections for January were $145,000 over our budget for January. We're currently over budget for revenue for the year by $429,000, almost $430,000. I would hesitate to call this a trend yet. I'm sure you've seen in our sister cities such as Midland, they've been up in the double digits in the last several months, in the 30s and 40s even, and this year they're up about 8%. And so, like I said, I just hesitate to call it a trend yet. We'll just be happy that we're seeing these numbers for now. So
I would agree with you. I was very concerned to see the dramatic difference in Midland and Abilene's sales tax, particularly Midland, because they had been running 30 to 40% increases, and they're down to less than 9 or 8 point something. So we don't know if those increases were directly related to the summer storm and the dollars attached to that, or whether it is an issue relative to the oil and gas industry and the pickup in that industry. So I caution us to be conservative, not to assume that we're going to continue to have double-digit increases, and to continue to be aware that other cities aren't continuing with the same trend. Thank you, Tina.
you're welcome. Thank you. Wait, I forgot your chart that you requested.
Thank
This is for December. We have a little bit of a time lapse in trying to get this information from the state. So this is December's number. Just wanted to show you the difference between last year and this year and where we're seeing the increases. So you can see that retail probably increased by the most for this December of 2017.
Thank you for taking the time and effort to put that together.
Yes, ma'am. You're
Gives
very
a
welcome.
much greater picture.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we have follow-up and administrative issues, so we will, A, consider approving the following board nomination: Planning Commissioner Conley Brooks to an unexpired term ending January 2020.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any announcements or consideration for future agenda items? If not, do I have, oh, yes, Sari, sorry.
Just want to remind citizens that we will have a town hall meeting on February the 5th. This is a date change because of a conflict on next Monday. February 5th at St. Mary's at 6 p.m. Update on the Avenue P drainage issues.
Again, Harry, it's supposed to be at St. Mary's Church? Okay.
All right, anything else from council?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to adjourn, but first, this day has, I've just been off balance the whole time. Something's happened over here on the right side of the room.
Yeah, I just can't.
Brian and
What is
Teresa,
that?
I don't know if I can continue like this or not, so they switched places on us, and I mean, starting off the year like this is just, I mean.
It threw me off balance, too.
It's like, yes.
Dare we put on the spot who made, was that Teresa, was that your request, or Brian, was that your request?
Neither one of ours. It's a request of our public information officer.
Oh,
So I'd like to take this
Oh.
opportunity to dip him in the grease.
Okay.
So there goes his funding.
Yeah.
For a little TV camera or something or another.
Mayor, I'd move we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.